Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and Dota Underlords has just released the head-to-head update. This update has a lot of really cool stuff, so let's get right into it. First off, of course, the namesake of the head-to-head patch, players are now paired up to fight directly against each other and both take part in the same shared combat. So this is how Teamfight Tactics, another very popular auto chess variant, does their combat where, the two players will actually face each other. No more you're fighting a phantom army of someone else and you lose and then they lose to you and it comes down to who dies first. None of that. Everybody's going to be paired up and there's going to be exactly one winner or a draw in every fight, and so no more of that weird fighting a clone army. Unless, of course, there's an odd number of players. So if there's an odd number of players, you can't pair up, so one person will fight a clone of an actual player. So that'll still exist, but that just happens because, there's an odd number of players. And, of course, the leaderboard will now pair up players when they're in head-to-head combat, so you can kind of better see who's fighting who. So that'll be all around a very nice change. It was always a very weird system to try to explain to newer players, your army gets duplicated and you only lose life if you lose on your board, and just get rid of that. You fight somebody else and then the loser takes damage. Very simple, very straightforward. Next, the new ranking system. So I made a video about the new ranking system earlier this week, or whenever they first announced it, how your rank will now move up and down in a very predictable way. You have a set amount of ranking points that you'll gain based on your placement, rather than some arbitrary behind-the-scenes formula. And it'll be based solely on where you finish in the ranked match and does not depend on an opponent's rank. And you'll, of course, gain bonus points when you reach a minor rank. So when I covered this when they first announced it, they've actually updated it very slightly since then. So let's go to this. I've actually already opened it in a tab here. And so the updates that they made is you can actually, before I said you could only queue up solo and ranked, and they have there's a lot of feedback on that people wanted to play ranked with their friends because it's a social game. People like playing games with friends, so they've gone back on that. And how they're going to handle that now is if you're in a ranked party, that you basically don't count your party as an opponent in the game. I mean, you can still play against them and your armies still fight each other, but in terms of the amount of points that you gain here, you can be in a party of 2 or in a party of 3. Essentially, if you're in a party of 2, you are treated as if you are playing in a 7-player game. It's you and 6 opponents, but your friend is not counted. So what that means is you basically remove your friend from the standings. So if at the end your friend places first and you place second, then really you placed first because you just don't count your friend. So you beat everybody who wasn't your friend, who wasn't already in your party. So you placed first and then you get the plus 88, even if you really come second in the game. And of course, if you come dead last, well, you really only came 7th out of 7 players because your friend does not count towards that total. So they've adjusted the formula in this way so that now your average is expected to get 4th. But remember, that's not 4th in the end, in the real score of the game. If your friend places above you and you are 4th place for real, you're actually placed 3rd because your friend doesn't count as somebody above you. And if you really placed 4th but your friend placed below you, they went out in 8th, then really you got 5th because there were 4 other opponents ahead of you. So it's a little bit weird and it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but it's a good solution to prevent ways of boosting. I was going to say buying, but boosting your ranking by pairing up with friends. So they've reworked the number system and allow you to queue up with parties of up to 3. So that's a really cool change, and I really am glad that they took that feedback from the community over the past week to allow multiplayer ranked. So let's go back to the main patch notes because there's a lot more than just the ranked system. They've casual mode, I've covered that in the previous one about how there will be a ranked mode and a casual mode, and we discussed that in the previous video, and so all of that is still the same. Achievements are a new little way of gaining some cool cosmetics. You can earn Protopass XP, and there's a set of achievements that you work towards over time. There's a whole new tab and they can equip banner sigils. So you can kind of customize your banner that shows up on your board based on the achievements that you've unlocked, which is a very nice. More customization is always better in these type of games. You want to show off your personal flair and kind of make it your own, and this is a great way of doing it. They've also added new upgraded looks to a bunch of heroes. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but a lot of them get new cosmetics where they're going to have the basic version at 1 star. They'll get a little bit of cosmetics when you get them to 2 star, and then at 3 star they got a nice, fancy set. A lot of these cosmetics come from the cosmetics in Dota 2. In terms of actual gameplay changes, the round damage has been eliminated for the first set of PvP rounds between rounds 4 and 9. So previously, originally, the game had 0 damage, baseline damage from rounds 4 to 9, and then at rounds 11 you would start taking 1 damage, plus the star levels of your opponent's units. Now it's kind of a happy medium between the two. So for the opening set of PvP rounds, you will not take bonus damage, but the round damage will come to the higher level starting at round 11. But very importantly, whenever a player loses a round against another player, the loser gains a free reroll the next round. This reroll is not stackable, so use it or lose it. That is huge. Very huge in the early game, and my God, on round 4, I just want to lose every round. You just want to lose now in the early game, right? You basically get 2 free gold. And that combined with the blacklisting effect that came out a few patches ago, where whenever you reroll, you will not be offered a unit that was in your previous shop, because you don't want to buy it. So it's not going to say, well, here, maybe you want to buy it the second time. So this will really even out games. People who are going on good win streaks because, they got a bunch of 2-star units. Well, the people down lower who are losing those rounds now have much better odds of getting, catching back up to those top players. So I really love this as a catch-up mechanic. And it's something that I really can't believe it took this long to come up with something like this. And so I like it a lot. I really, really do. Next, general fixes. So most things here are just bug fixes and optimizations. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that. But the last bullet point is important. Added option as default. Default is on to automatically deploy units from your bench if you have room on the board and combat begins before you had time to do so yourself. How many times have you been leveling up and moving characters in and out, and suddenly you have a higher level and you forgot to put a unit in? That will not happen anymore. It'll automatically put a unit from your bench onto the board. So there's a couple times when you accidentally forgot to put a unit out, the game got you covered. So that's nice. UI changes, nothing really important here, just general updates and polishes. So always nice to see. Spectating, same kind of deal. Fixed some of the animation. I know spectating was always a little buggy in the game. So hopefully they smoothed some of that out. Oh wait, actually that's pretty interesting. Spectators can now see the shop of players from the same party that they started the match with. I actually missed this on my first reading of these notes. So that actually has some pretty big implications for how tournaments can be casted and displayed, because that was always my biggest issue is well, if you can't see the shop of the players, then the viewer experience is pretty bad from a tournament perspective. So now if you can get spectators who can see the shop of all the players, that's going to dramatically improve the viewability or watchability of gameplay and tournament play. So that's a very big change that I very much like. Okay, on to some balance changes. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I did not think they were going to put balance changes in this patch. I knew this patch was coming. I knew they said this patch was going to be big, but I thought they were going to be adjusting the ranks and cosmetics and battle passes and things like that. I did not expect balance changes, or at least not major ones. And there are some major balance changes. So it's unfortunate because earlier this week I spent a lot of time putting together my meta snapshot and the top 5 builds and stuff like that, and it's kind of all out the window now. So sorry, but that's all right. The cycle keeps on turning, and we will figure out how the meta adjusts with this. So let's talk about the hero changes. Crystal Maiden has been changed from 2 cost to 3 cost, and her health has been buffed slightly. Not a huge change. But the 2 cost to 3 cost, and then down here we see Lina goes from 3 down to 2 cost to kind of keep the numbers the same. I think on the whole that is a nerf to mage strategies, or strategies that want to run Crystal Maiden, now that she'll be much harder to find and harder to get to 2-star, which is probably reasonable. I think Crystal Maiden was kind of a low-key, not overpowered unit, but was very, very prevalent in the meta and kind of enabled a lot of strategies that I'm okay to see it taken down a peg, if that makes sense. It was never like the most oppressive thing, but it enabled so many strategies where like no one else would do the job. So I think she was a little too prevalent. Eidolons, this is not actually a hero. This is the spawn units that come from the Primordial. Previously, they came from the Primordial item, but as we'll see in a moment, they come now from the Primordial Alliance. So those have been slightly nerfed. I guess their base damage has gone up slightly, but their armor has been reduced. Okay, that's fine. Well, they've been adjusting. We'll have to see how that plays out. So we'll talk about that more in a moment. Juggernaut. Juggernaut will now only cast Blade Fury when he's surrounded by at least 2 enemies. I think that's fine because it previously was like a DPS loss if he was just spinning on one opponent. So that's like it's not really a bug fix, but it's a slight buff, I think, to Juggernaut. We just mentioned Lina. She got her cost decreased but did not lose any stats. So that's a buff to her, obviously, but it's a nerf to mages because Crystal Maiden went up in cost. And Lina is still not a good mage because she's a single target mage in an AoE focused build. Ogre Magi. I don't know how many times they have to buff Ogre Magi before he just becomes bustedly good in the meta, but I don't think this is it. Ogre Magi now gets, let's see, so when he casts his buff on other people at 2-star, they get more attack speed, about 25 more. It used to be 40, now up to 65. If he cast it on himself, he used to get 55, now he gets 90. I don't know, maybe this is enough, but Ogre Magi suffers from the same problem as Lina, in that he's a mage that doesn't deal AoE damage. But this is a pretty big buff. I mean, that's a lot more attack speed. 90 over 55. That's like a Moonshard at 2-star. So it's possible that we start to see Ogre Magi or like Bloodbound builds a little bit more popular due to this buff, but he's still not going to go into mage builds who want magic damage. Speaking of magic damage, Shadow Fiend. So Shadow Fiend was arguably the best unit in the patch before this. He was just prevalent in a lot of Warlock compositions as well as mage compositions, so it's no surprise to see him taken down a peg here. His attack range got nerfed, so he's not quite as long range as he used to be. And his ability, the projectiles were like deceptively large. They would actually grow as they spread out, which means multiple projectiles would hit people far away, and that contributed to a lot of his damage. So they've nerfed that pretty considerably. This is one that like I can't just say, oh, the numbers mean this and it's about this percentage of a change. These are numbers I'm going to have to play around with to see exactly how big of a nerf this is to him. I still think he'll fit into a lot of the places that we saw him before. I mean, he still does AoE damage. His damage has not been nerfed, but maybe he hits less people now. It's certainly at further range, but close by, he's still going to hit people who are a couple squares away from him. So overall, a nerf, but it's hard to say exactly how big it will be from just this reading. Venomancer. This is definitely a nerf to Veno. So Venomancer used to be absurdly good at 3-star. He used to spawn one ward at 1-star and 2-star, and then he spawned 3 wards at 3-star, which just made him crazy when he got him to 3-star. Now he spawns 1 at every single level. And the maximum the maximum health of the wards has gone up very slightly at 2-star, whatever. Maximum attack damage has been increased across the board. So the wards hit a little bit harder. And so I guess maybe this is a buff to 1 and 2-star, or I guess it's a slight buff to 2-star Venomancer, but a nerf to 3-star Venomancer, which is fair. 3-star Venomancer was pretty stupidly good this past patch, so I think that's a fair kind of rebalancing, taking some power out of the 3-star and adding a touch of it back into the 2-star version. It's not huge, and I still think you'll see him in a lot of the Savage builds for reasons we'll discuss in a moment. But just know that he's not like the super highest priority to 3-star now like he used to be. In the last hero change, Witch Doctor's Paralyzing Cask, his cooldown has been increased, which is also fair. He was pretty strong, very common in the Troll builds because his Troll Alliance, and in Warlocks because Warlocks were just very strong. So that's an acceptable nerf. Item changes. So here is the biggest thing. Alliance items are gone. Disabled. Many of the effects that were very emblematic of a lot of the Alliance items that were like very commonly used and were like key to their strategies have been baked into the alliances themselves. And the ones that haven't, such as like Hunter's Focus, that just gave straight bonus attack damage for as many hunters, are gone. They are just not in the game. So they've also added some new items to replace some of those numbers. Let's go down these one by one. Helm of the Undying. A tier 2 defensive item gives some armor, +5 armor, and the equipped hero survives for an extra 4 seconds after receiving a killing blow. So this is replicating the Warrior Alliance item that's gone, but only for 1 unit, and does come with some armor. That's pretty long. 4 seconds is a lot longer than the old Warrior one was, so that's a lot of time to get some attacks off, and I would not be surprised to see you pick this up. You throw it on a Kunkka or a Tidehunter or a Disruptor or anybody who you're afraid of them being killed before they can get their ability off. This will basically ensure they get their ability off, because if they're taking enough damage to be killed, they are taking enough damage to get enough mana to cast their ability. So you'll see this a lot if you want to, like I said, Kunkka, Tidehunter, Disruptor are some of the popular targets for this. Bracers of Desperation. So this incorporates the Mage Final Flash item that is now gone. It's a tier 3 support item. Equipped hero resets their cooldown and gets full mana when below 30% health. Attack target's magic resistance is reduced by 30%. This is actually crazy. This is a refresher orb at tier 3. So I initially thought, oh, this is just like the mage replacement. But now I'm thinking, this is just a refresher orb. This goes on Lone Druid. It's not limited to mages. This goes on Lone Druid or Tidehunter or Disruptor or Kunkka. And suddenly you get a second ult. It's a refresher orb at tier 3. Yeah, I mean, they have to get below 30% health and they had to have cast beforehand, but like all of those units I just mentioned will. And not just that, they also come with a attack target's magic resistance is reduced by 30%. All right, this item is bustedly good. This item is like S tier right now. I mean, refresher orb this is a tier 3 refresher orb with upside. Yeah, this item is, I mean, okay, you don't get the, oh no, you I was going to say refresher orb comes with 50 mana. This comes with full mana. All right, that's silly. This one needs to be nerfed ASAP. I haven't even played with it, and I know it has to be nerfed. Next up, Poaching Knife. Tier 3 offensive equipment. Equipped hero has a 30% chance of producing 1 gold when they kill an enemy. Attacks against units with less than 20% health crit for 200%. I assume attacks from the equipped unit. It's not attacks from everybody. This one is not as good as Bracers of Desperation, but it's okay because nothing's going to be as good as Bracers of Desperation. Still a good item. Still a reasonable choice. Can give you a pretty decent amount of money over the course of a game. So imagine imagine a lot of those, like when Beastmaster would get his stacks up on Forged in Battle, he'd have like, I don't know, 30, 40 kills over the course of a game. So this translates to like 10 bonus gold in situations like that. Plus, of course, having the bonus crit on low health targets. So I think this is a perfectly acceptable item, and I like it quite a bit. I like the design. I like how it incorporates it in, and yeah, I think it's a reasonable item. It's no Bracers of Desperation though. Dawning of Her Stool, tier 3 global item. Healing for both crews is reduced by 50%. So this replaces the old Heartless Warlock or Heartless item that was actually bugged for quite a while that reduced healing. So I like that it's symmetrical. I really like how it's symmetrical. So it says, hey, you can't play with much healing yourself, but for a lot of builds, that's not really a drawback. And so it's a good counter that exists. And they also removed some items, including Cloak, Recruiter, Vicious Intent, and Wicked Intent. I thought Wicked Intent was a Alliance item. Anyway, so Vicious Intent, that's the one that dealt extra damage based on how many of your units survived. Good. That item was terrible. It was terrible in for both players. You never want to really pick it because it doesn't help you win rounds. But if you get beat by it, oh god, it just feels like the worst thing in the world. So I'm glad that's gone. Recruiter was way too good. That item was so absurd. Getting double your rerolls, glad to see it removed. That was just if somebody got it, it was just the best item in the game. And Cloak was it didn't do anything. So glad that one's gone. Other item changes. Big Time Contract, the Bloodbound item, changed from equipped unit as Bloodbound in addition to plus 250 health and as Bloodbound in addition. Man, they are really pushing this Bloodbound theme by the Ogre Magi buffs, and this Bloodbound contract, this is a major buff to it, obviously. So I would like to see some more Bloodbound games. I know those are really fun games too, so that's probably why they're pushing it. It's a fun play style that really never sees the light of the meta. Maybe with this, it incentivizes you to pick Big Time Contract early and build more Bloodbound. So we'll see how that plays out. Brooch of the Martyr, same kind of deal, where change from plus 50% mana gain to you still have the plus 50, but you also have 50% debuff resistance. This is kind of incorporating the Human Alliance item, which is not very good. Debuff resistance is just not that important in this game. In the current state of it, in the current state of the game, there's just not many debuffs that are so impactful that reducing it by 50% is going to be make or break a fight. There's just not a lot of them. So maybe at some point that may change. But this is a straight buff to a relatively underperforming item in Brooch of the Martyr. Chainmail got rebuffed back up to 10 armor, up from 7, which puts it right back at the top. But we also see that the other tier 1 items, Claymore and Gloves of Haste, have also been buffed. So maybe it's not, that just is needed to keep pace with the changes to these other ones. Claymore goes up to 30 damage, and Gloves of Haste goes up to 25 attack speed. So overall, buffing the tier 1 items. And by buffing, I mean moving Hood of Defiance from tier 3 down to tier 1 with no changes to the stats on it. Hood of Defiance was already my bottom tier of the tier 3. Speaking of which, there's too many tiers. If you're trying to rank how good an item is within a tier, it just gets messy. So of the tier 3 items, Hood of Defiance was the weakest in my opinion. So now that it's a tier 1 item, it's probably going to be pretty competitive with a lot of other tier 1 items. Octavian Essence, tier changed from 2 to 3. Octavian Essence was always kind of a niche item. It was very good on certain units, but not every unit in every build, something like Gloves of Haste. Everybody has somebody who wants Gloves of Haste. But Octavian Essence is not all the time. But when it was good, it was quite good. So I'm fine to see it moved up to tier 3. Even now, I think it'll be a little bit underperforming within the tier 3, though. Certainly, now it has to compete with things like Maelstrom, which, I don't know how you compare Octavian Essence to Maelstrom. Tranquil Boots. Health regen has been increased along with the other tier 1 items. Should be... So previously, Tranquil Boots and Vitality Booster were, kind of close. Whereas, Tranquil Boots would win out in a longer fight and Vitality Booster would win out in shorter fights. Now, Now the breakpoint is now 10 seconds in combat. 10 seconds of taking damage and regening. I think they're very comparable now. Maybe a slight nod towards Tranquil Boots over Vitality Booster. And finally, they also reworked Force Staff. Wonderful. I hated Force Staff. It moved a random unit in a random direction, and that was horrible. You could never play around it. You could never strategize around it. I was begging for a rework or removing the item from the game. They did rework it. It now pushes melee attackers away instead of randomness. It does have a cooldown, but now whenever whoever's holding the Force Staff gets attacked by a melee attacker, it's going to push that melee attacker, I think it was 6 squares away. So that is something that you can definitely plan around. You can kind of say, oh, they've got their Kunkka or Tidehunter or somebody up front, and let's just send them to the back. Get them out of here. And it only affects melee attackers, so you can't really use it to, the person right behind them, if their ranged unit gets their attack off first, like what happens with Scythe of Eye sometimes, you accidentally, polymorph the wrong target. That won't happen in Force Staff. It will hit the melee target. So now I don't really know if it moves super high on the tier list, but it's definitely a worthy consideration for a lot of builds now. It's very disruptive and very predictably disruptive. And the final section, Alliance Changes. So the first one, Elusive. Elusive at level 3 when you have 9 heroes changes from all allied elusive gains plus 75 evasion to all units gain 75 evasion. That's like not relevant. That's only relevant when you have 9 elusive and then 1 non-elusive. Like you have to have 10. Okay. It is a buff to 9 elusive builds that are at level 10. That's so rare though. 9 elusive is also pretty rare. So whatever. I'm not going to dwell too much on it. Warlock. This is a big one. Warlocks were dominating the past meta, and now their healing link duration has changed from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. This kills the Warlock. This is like a 50% reduction in healing. If they used to heal for 100 damage, now they're only going to heal for, well, I guess it's not 50%. It's a 33% change. So it's a 33% nerf to their damage, or their healing. Sorry, I keep on saying damage. Their healing effects, I think that really drops them pretty hard. They were everywhere, so understandable. And to be fair, it kind of got a little bit dull, having every fight coming down to massive amounts of healing. Just like when we had Treant Protector at 2-star. Just too much healing is not fun, right? It's not fun to just, oh, that guy's almost dead, and they healed to full. So no problem seeing Warlocks nerfed. The other changes, Brawny, like the changes to Brawny, Savage, Shaman, Primordial Inventor, like all the remaining ones are ones that incorporate their alliance item, like we mentioned before. So Brawny, instead of just giving them a flat maximum HP increase, now they get plus 30 or 60 max HP for each kill that they have. So it's essentially like if you have the Brawny buff, you have the old Forged in Battle item, although at slightly different numbers. It used to be 25, 50, 75, now it's 30 at just 2 Brawnies, but if you get all 4, you double that. This is actually really big. Before alliance items were reworked and then removed, the Forged in Battle was always just plus 50 health, and that was considered very strong. Like, you would always pick it and then just force Brawny if you picked it up in the opening 3 rounds or in round 10. You would just pick it and you would force it and it would be great. Now you always have it. You are essentially always offered the Brawny buff or the Brawny item because you just pick up the alliance and it's that good. That's really strong. Very strong. I think we're going to see a lot of 4 Brawny builds being very popular in the meta. Savage. So Savage changed from allies gain plus attack damage to now they apply a stackable bleed for 3 seconds. Duration refreshes on each attack. So this is basically you have the Tooth and Claw item, but they did get nerfed in the sense that you don't gain the attack damage. So that's one of the things I mentioned in my meta analysis article or video was that the Tooth and Claw builds were very well rounded. If you got Tooth and Claw, you had a good early game because the bleed was very effective in the early game. But you also had good late game because you had this percentage attack damage increase from the Savage bonus. So it was a good well-rounded. It was good early and late. Now it looks a lot better early game with the flat damage amounts, just 10, 15, 10, or 5, 10, 15 damage bleed. When people have 1,000 health, I don't know, getting a bleed for 45 or 60 damage, like, come on, they got 1,000 plus health. But when they only have 500 health, that's a good bit more substantial. So they're still going to be an early game focused build, and they lose a lot of power in late game because they don't have that plus 25% attack damage later on or more. Shamans are still worthless, but they changed from enemies affected by hexes, silences, or stuns will generate negative mana to units attacking Shaman have a 17% chance of being turned into a chicken and hop 4 cells in a random direction. Still worthless because you're still never going to get 3 Shamans on the board at the same time. It just doesn't happen because the Shamans are just towards so many different strategies, and like there's so few Shamans, and like if you only have 3 units on your board that have a chance of polymorphing them, like, okay, to be fair, this is better than it used to be. This line of text here is stronger than this line of text here. I don't think it's enough to start playing 3 Shaman builds on a regular basis, but maybe you'll start throwing it in if you have key opposing units that you really need to take care of, kind of like Scythe of Eyes, they've got a Tidehunter or Disruptor or like Dragon Knight even, because the Dragon Knight will attack your Shaman on the front line, and hey, you got a 17% chance of getting them out of there every attack. So, the more I'm talking about this, the more I start to see the case for running this buff. Certainly more than the old version. So I'm not going to rule out Shamans just yet. But I still think playing 3 Shamans is a tall order for most builds. Next up, Primordial. Changed from enemies attacking Primordial have a 25% chance to be slowed, blah, 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 to now allied Primordial units spawn a rank 1 or 2 Eidolon on death. Eidolons are ranged Primordials that don't spawn more Eidolons. So that comes back to what we talked about earlier about the Eidolons having their stats changed. So it now moves away from being a defensive alliance to being an offensive one. I mean, it's kind of both offensive and defensive, right? Spawning extra units means they can tank for a little bit longer, but they also deal damage. So essentially, you got rid of the wonky stun / slow / disarm on attack, and now you just have this death effect where they spawn an extra dude to keep the fight going on for a little bit longer. I don't think this really impacts Primordial. To be fair, I always thought, except for that 1 week when Primordials were stupidly good, there was always kind of a secondary alliance. It was kind of an afterthought. Like, if you want to play the 2 Primordial, great. But you're mainly playing them because they're individually good units. Razor is great in mages. Morphling does a lot of AoE magic damage and is a good assassin. Tiny has a good stun. Arc Warden does his copy thing with items. So like you're running those for those effects and not because they're Primordial. Inventor. Inventor has been changed from allied inventors get bonus HP regen to now allied inventors explode on death, dealing 15 to 30% of their max health to all enemies 1 square away. So that basically removes their bonus HP regen and gives them that explosion item that they used to have. This is actually, I think it's a nerf in the early game, but they're trying to move inventors away from like an early game focused build by moving Clockwork and Tinker up to 3 cost from a couple patches ago. So this is probably better because the 15 and 40 HP regen was like not really that relevant come the mid to late game when everybody's hitting for a lot more damage than that. It was very relevant in the opening rounds. So moving to this explosion damage, I think is an overall buff, especially because I think it does magic damage, right? And if it does magic damage, then the Inventor, Scrappy, and Mage build is going to be very good because it'll deal magic damage and it'll get buffed by mages. So look to see that Inventor scrappy mage build be very popular and very strong going forward. Demon Hunter. So this one is just a straight buff. In addition to the existing bonuses, both levels of Demon Hunter now also say that all Demon Hunters gain 30% pure damage for each unique allied demon unit. That's insane. That is insane. Demon Hunter meta. It's going to be a Demon Hunter meta. This is just a straight buff. It's essentially saying everybody in the game starts with Strange Bedfellows tier 1. Like you start round 1, you have Strange Bedfellows tier 1. Just period. That's it. That's what it says. That's crazy because typically picking up a Strange Bedfellows would be like, yeah, I'm really incentivized to go Demon Hunters now. But now you don't even need to pick a unit on it or an item on it, and you just start with it. Okay, you can't stack it now because you can't get multiples, but you can just pick good items instead. And you don't need to worry about finding it. You just have it. It's also just a straight up buff to Anti-Mage, who didn't, I don't know, maybe he could use a little bit of a buff, but not this kind of a buff. Like, if you just run Anti-Mage plus any demon, like not even with Terrorblade, just run Anti-Mage plus like your Queen of Pain in like, I don't know, some assassin elusive build, he's just 30% stronger. He just deals 30% pure damage because now there's one demon on your team. I think this should have said if you have 2 instead of at both levels. This is just a crazy buff. And Demon Hunters will be one of, if not the top build in the coming meta. For sure. Because this is a crazy good buff. And lastly, Assassins. At 9 heroes, which you just never want to get to. You want 3 or 6 Assassins. At 9 Assassins, you get Pocket Sand. In addition to the existing bonus, they also have Assassins blind enemies for 2 seconds. Just getting to 9 Assassins is so annoying because there's so many bad Assassins. Viper, Bounty Hunter, and Bloodseeker are just not great in the late game. They're just too weak compared to other options that you could be playing. And like, this hurts Assassins a lot, which is a shame because Assassins were my favorite build. But you really wanted that Pocket Sand on 6 Assassins, and requiring it to get up to 9, I don't think it's going to be very good. So, thoughts on what the new meta is going to be like? It's going to be Demon Hunters. It's going to be Brawny. It might be Savage. It's hard to tell with Savage. Savage is probably going to be an early game focus kind of one. But definitely Demon Hunter, definitely Brawny, where basically you just start with their global items. Those are going to be crazy. Warlock got a huge nerf. Mages and Inventors and kind of that scrappy build are going to be interesting. We'll see if they become relevant. And the new item, Bracers of Desperation, bustedly good. It's a Refresher Orbit tier 3. Put it on a Lone Druid, put it on a Kunkka, put it on somebody. It's insane. So, I can't wait to get playing on this patch. I think it's going to be great, especially with all the other changes, like the changes to the ranked system, the changing to head-to-head. It's going to be a ton of fun, even if some of their balance decisions are a little bit sketchy. I cannot wait to play it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.